Hey folks, our friends at Sunset Lake Sebede have a new release just in time for Labor Day barbecues, backyard hangouts, and more relaxation. If you enjoyed their lifted teas, well, you might want to try their new lifted tea microdose. Each can has 1 milligram of THC and 5 milligrams of fast-acting Sebede, so you'll start to feel it in around 20 minutes. The low dose means you can have a few cans and feel a boozeless bliss. They come in two flavors. Original is a classic black iced tea with zesty lemon, just a hint of mango, and mint green is a refreshing mix of sencha green tea and refreshing spearmint. All are naturally sweetened with Vermont honey from the fourth generation family farm, and these lifted teas are great. I've been enjoying them a little bit like at 5 o'clock, on the weekdays when I'm trying to be my best for work, and it's just a really easy way to relax. They're great. You know, I can speak very highly of the Sunset Lake Sebede products all over the place, but this new product, it's nice. And it's nice to just be able to have a beverage that tastes good and know that you're getting a little bit of that very well grown, pesticide free Sebede included, and a little bit of THC. So here's the deal, folks. Buy any 3 4-packs and you will get a fourth one for free. Just add 4 4-packs to your cart and use the code LABORDAY25 at checkout. Skip the beer and avoid the hangover while still enjoying the party with lifted teas. Again, that's code LABORDAY25 at checkout. This promotion ends September 1st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Head over to sunsetlakesebede.com for terms and conditions. Again, that's code Labor Day, and this is the sale for the release of the lifted tea microdose versions of these flavors. Labor Day 25 at checkout, sunsetlakesebede.com for terms and conditions. Now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, August 25th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live, steps, from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Joseph Lee, author of Nothing More of This Land, Community, Power, and the Search for Indigenous Identity. Also on the program, political prisoner Kilmar Abrego Garcia was freed on Friday, but arrested again on Monday as the White House threatens to send him to Uganda. Some National Guardsmen in D.C. start carrying firearms, and Trump confirms he's sending them to Chicago next. Immigration agents targeted a bilingual daycare in Washington, D.C. over the weekend. Trump threatens to cancel funds for the reconstruction of the Francis Scott Key Bridge because Maryland's governor criticized his authoritarian performance. It's also not a coincidence that he's targeting basically any Democrat who's a black person. Israel bombed southern Gaza's most important hospital. If you recall, we just spoke to Dr. Lubani, who was stationed there. Is stationed there. They killed at least 4 journalists, nearly 20 people in total, including an Associated Press freelancer. Israel also bombed Yemen's capital over the weekend. European postal agencies start cutting off shipments of smaller goods to the U.S. because Trump keeps going back and forth on the de minimis tariff exemption. Unions raised the alarm over a proposed freight rail mega merger that would automate many things and increase the likelihood of toxic spills. Norfolk Southern is one of the companies trying to mega merge. Didn't something just happen with those guys a few years back? Pretty big deal. Trump announces the government will purchase a 10% stake in Intel with nearly $9 billion in taxpayer money moved around from the CHIPS Act. The DOJ releases audio of Trump's personal attorney interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell, and it is not fooling anybody. Well, except maybe his diehards. And lastly, Bernie Sanders is headed to Maine to campaign with Graham Plattner over Labor Day weekend. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Monday. Fun day. Monday. Hello, Matt. Hello, Brian. Sam is out this week. He will be back after Labor Day on Monday, enjoying a well-deserved vacation. Let's get into it here. So, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was released from a Tennessee jail on Friday after being incarcerated first in the torture prison in Secot in El Salvador, where his lawyer said to the courts that he was severely beaten. Then the administration was forced to send him back to the United States in June. A reminder that there was a 2019 order from a judge on Kilmar Abrego Garcia's status in the United States that barred him from being sent to El Salvador because of the fears that he credibly told to the court, and they believed him, about basically violence and political persecution. And seemingly on purpose, in spite of that, the administration sent him there because of the sadism that is involved here and the example making here. Because, God forbid, there was some grassroots activism to try to return this man to his family. God forbid Chris Van Hollen and other Democrats went down there and highlighted his case. Nazi Stephen Miller, president-in-chief, shadow president, is clearly a driving force behind this. They're now accusing him of criminal human smuggling with zero evidence. And
trying to get other people they have on the hook for deportation to testify against them, giving them promises like, okay, we won't send you to wherever, Uganda, Secot, spin the wheel, if you make up stuff to allow us to detain him.
That's what they're doing here now. So they are trying to coerce him by saying, we're going to send you to Uganda, a country he has never been.
Insane.
To coerce him into pleading guilty to charges of smuggling that he is clearly not guilty of. This is a mafia shakedown administration of the highest order, and also such a typical right-wing fascist administration in the way that they are picking on someone like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was a metal worker in Maryland. They go after you if they think you have no power. This is across the board with their targeting of immigrants. They're not going after some people working at Meta, I'll tell you that, who may have overstayed their visas. But just to give people a sense of the torment that is being inflicted on this man and his family. This was Friday, after he was released from Putnam County Jail and reunited with his family. He was away from them for over 160 days in horrific conditions, despite doing absolutely nothing wrong. Si se him with his son, I believe.
Si se pudo, si se pudo.
So I think, there we go. People get a sense of just how incredibly emotional, obviously, that was. But no peace for this family because the Trump administration has made them a target. We now have moved to this morning where he showed up to this hearing that is about trying to coerce him to plead guilty to be sent off to Uganda. And on this morning, his lawyer asked a federal judge basically to block this so that he can have a full immigration trial. And Abrego Garcia spoke with a translator from Casa outside of the courthouse this morning.
Siempre recordé momentos hermosos con mi familia, momentos de ir al parque, de ir al trampolín con mis hijos.
When I was detained, I remembered memories with my family, going to the park with them, going to the trampoline with my children.
Esos momentos me darán fuerzas y esperanza para seguir luchando.
Those moments will continue to give me hope to continue in this fight.
A toda la familia también que han sufrido separaciones y que viven constantemente por la amenaza de ser separadas, quiero decirle, aunque la injusticia nos está golpeando duro, no perdamos la fe.
To all the families who have been separated, or to all the families who have been threatened with family separation, this administration has hit us hard. But I want to tell you guys something.
Dios está con nosotros. Dios nunca nos dejará. Dios hace justicia a toda la injusticia que han hecho.
God is with us, and God will never leave us. God will bring justice to all of the injustice that we are suffering.
So powerful to hear from him there. I can't imagine the trauma that he's gone through. And this saga, if you just take a step back and think about how the White House is so terrified of putting faces to these people that they are torturing, destroying their lives, abusing illegally via our clearly broken immigration system that they are exploiting for fascistic ends. Their argument was basically that after these dozens of folks were kidnapped from American soil and sent to CCOT, that they did not have the power to do anything on that front. That now it was in their hands, and quietly they usher him back in, but now they have to work in their mind to send him out and make an example of him again, because he's even more threatening to them now. Because his presence even back in the United States, the human face, him hugging his wife, there was other footage, you know, I was like on the verge of tears this morning watching, we didn't include it, but and it almost felt a little voyeuristic because the New York Post had it, but they're like holding each other for minutes on end because they don't know what's going to happen. And he could be sent to a foreign country he has no connection to. He's even more of a threat to them now because he shows that they are not all powerful and scary, that we can stand up against this administration despite seemingly insurmountable power imbalances.
I saw somebody ask the question in the chat, why can't they just admit you made a mistake and free the guy? And the answer is because none of this is rational. This is entirely an exercise, a billions and billions and billions of dollars exercise in fascist hysteria.
Yeah.
In a demographic panic by white supremacists. The idea and also like lying about the state of crime and the situation in this country as opposed to like the threat made by immigrants. You need to be frothing at the mouth hysterical for this to make any kind of sense. It needs to be a panic. So they need to act as if it's one. And when you start acknowledging like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have sent that hairdresser to El Salvador for 4 months to be sexually, raped. Or at least harassed. I can't remember.
No, he was
he
was forced to give head to. He was raped. He was raped by a prison guard there.
And that's just like part of the cost of doing business, because we have to act as if this is like, saving America or some shit. No, it is one of the darkest sort of mass hysterical events that we've gone through since like the Salem witch trials, or lynching black people after the restoration of white supremacy after the Civil War.
And deportation is a legal process that would be at no matter our disagreements, our severe disagreements with many of our immigration processes, there is one that is delineated. They're not deporting him. They're kidnapping him without basically any due process. Deportation would have come in theory, however flawed it is, because our immigration courts exploit this legal gray area for people who aren't citizens. But there is some semblance of a process. They are kidnapping them and taking them to countries they've never been. This is happening and has happened to other people. And they're attempting it now with perhaps the most high-profile political prisoner of this fascist ICE administration.
And the truth is that we've long been prioritizing violent offenders for deportation when it comes to the not undocumented population. And so that's still part of it. If you go to ICE's like Twitter page, they're not talking about how we just like went to Home Depot and deported like 7 guys. It's look at this criminal. But they need to also get their numbers up, because they are embarrassed that, Obama and Biden had such high deportation numbers. So now they want to get their numbers up. This is a quota game, and you can't hit your numbers if you're, being precious about people's civil liberties.
Let's hear the bulldog himself, Tom Homan, lay out exactly what they intend to do here. This was over the weekend, speaking about what they intend to do with this man and his family.
Response to accusations that you're weaponizing the immigration system, and will, in fact, Abrego Garcia soon be heading to Uganda?
He is absolutely going to be deported from this country. He's not going to walk the streets of this nation. So he can enjoy the little time he has with his family. And for the person who says we're not going to separate family, well, his family can go with him, because he's leaving. He's going to be deported. Look, he's a criminal alien. He's a member of MS-13, which is now a designated terrorist. He's a wife beater. He's a human trafficker. He's been indicted for human trafficking.
Can you pause
smuggling.
this? The wife beater stuff gets me so mad. His wife, who he's still with, look, I don't like making claims about people's personal lives. Things can get heated. Of course, domestic abuse is horrific, but she basically retracted her claim, and they worked it out, and they're still together. Now, if she filed charges, this would be appropriate. But there's a thing like, I don't know, the Secretary of Defense, there was a police report filed against him by a woman at a conservative convention that said that she thought she was drugged by him, that he took her phone away, blocked the door to the hotel room he brought her back to, and pinned her on the bed. She went to a hospital. She got a report done. But is he going to be deported to Uganda based on that accusation, which is a little bit more severe, rape and drugging somebody? Is that going to happen? Or how about Donald Trump, who's found liable civilly of rape and sexual assault? Those are 2 accusations that have a lot more legal weight than this complaint by his wife that she ended up retracting, and they're still in this relationship. And either way, it would not matter, even if he had done all of these things, even if he was this horrible man, that he would still have to have his rights protected under the Constitution before being kidnapped to a foreign country.
Yeah, it's a microcosm of why places have things like sanctuary laws, because a woman should be able to report a domestic incident without worrying that the guy gets thrown into like a gulag someplace irretrievably, right? Like that's not actually justice. It's a parody of justice that
Right.
Native terrorist.
Also, the MS-13 thing, and then the compounding terrorist thing. There's no evidence for that. It's just like one cop suspected it based off how they're interpreting Knuckles.
White beater. He's a human trafficker. He's been indicted for human trafficking and alien smuggling. He's a bad person. He's not going to be here. He's been order removed twice. Order removed by 2 different federal judges. He's going to leave this country in the very near future, and his family can go with him. I can't see who was talking before the sound.
Oh, I'm so concerned about his wife. I'm gonna deport her to Uganda with him. He's a bad guy. You know, his what? No Republican's ever been accused of domestic violence, right? Or being unkind to their wife in the home. What are we gonna reopen conversations about marital rape again on the right, or what? What's up?
That this still has to be litigated is a sign of like just a joke, a circus. Like if this was all open and shut, then this whole thing about like he's been ordered removed twice. Why was he ordered to be returned from the first place? Because y'all don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Right, and the charges he's talking about are as frivolous as anything.
Exactly, like
purposefully.
Exactly, squeezing different types of migrants. Say, hey, make stuff up against Kilmar, or we're gonna send you out. Like, okay, I can say, I was totally human trafficking with him all the time. Crazy, and his knuckle tattoos do say MS-13.
But whoever said we're taking advantage of broken immigration system, what do they do? What do those people do the last 4 years about this broken immigration system? They let 10.5 million people cross that border. Sex trafficking women and children, all-time high. Overdose deaths of fentanyl, all-time high. Number of terrorists, all-time high. They didn't do anything to fix it. President Trump is keeping the promise to American people to enforce it.
And opioid deaths are going down. Like, this is hysterical. Like, this is... You know, there was a piece in our packet today about the Proud Boys, and basically they're like, we're not protesting because we got everything I want. This is just Proud Boy type of hysterical Chicken Little racism. The sky is falling against all of our white people to millions and millions. They always inflate the numbers, and it's always terrorists. It's not like, maybe Venezuelans because we decided to destroy their economy because Trump wanted to do a coup when he was in president the first time.
And that's what we're doing. We're making this country safer every day by removing people like Abrego Garcia.
Hey, just to follow up, Tom, so just to be clear, is Abrego Garcia headed to Uganda? The lawyers apparently telling the AP that DHS notified on Friday at 4 p.m. that they may remove him to Uganda in 72 hours. Can you confirm that?
Well, Uganda's on the table. We'll see. I mean, you know, DOJ's, you know, our immigration attorneys and the judges, they're all in negotiations, and we'll see what happens. But Uganda's on the table. We have an agreement with them. It's on the table, absolutely.
Okay.
Joke.
So, what are the charges about smuggling? Are they supposed to be? Are they going to play that out in court, or what? Oh, when he says absolutely he's going to be deported to Uganda, he basically means we're going to pursue this kangaroo court unless you volunteer to go to a country you've never been, on a continent perhaps you've never been.
I mean, I just can't believe, and I don't want to believe that there's like a huge mass. If I had to guess, probably about 25 to 30% of Americans who hear that and don't think that's the most ludicrous thing I've ever seen. This guy's been in Maryland as a union worker, and you're going to send him to Uganda and say this is for the safety of our country. It's again, it's Chicken Little Nazism.
I would love to see in the Democratic Party the complete collapse of his polling on immigration reflected in their rhetoric. It's basically been a collapse on his best issue that has happened mostly in a vacuum without their partisan input, with the exception of our more progressive members and people like Maxwell Frost and Chris Van Hollen going down to El Salvador, and others, I should say. There were some other representatives whose names I'm blanking on right now. but making hay out of it. Certainly not from leadership. This was supposedly Donald Trump's best issue, and he is underwater, basically nationally, ever since the Los Angeles National Guard stunt. He temporarily recovered after the Abrego Garcia case, but he's back in negatives significantly. Perhaps we can start to have rhetoric on our side that reflects that, but guess I'm not holding my breath right now.
We will win.
In a moment, we'll be speaking to Joseph Lee, but first, a word from two of our sponsors. Leave it to a professional. Some of your one sec. I think this might be out of order. Apologies. Yeah, hold on one sec. Sorry, guys. Oh, here we go. So ZocDoc is one of my favorite sponsors, and you know, your social feed is filled with a bunch of different health trends. Can red light therapy solve every skin problem? Should you be slamming olive oil shots? Well, let's give the algorithm a rest, please, and stop trying to find this stuff on the internet. Leave it to a professional. With ZocDoc, it is easy. You can find doctors that are right for you and instantly book an appointment. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. ZocDoc lets you book in-network appointments for more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty. You can filter for doctors who are near you, take your insurance, are a good fit for you, etc. You can find the type that you're looking for, from good bedside manner to fast wait times to doctors with the best listening skills. You can see their actual appointment openings, choose a time slot that works for you, and click to instantly book a visit. Appointments made through ZocDoc also happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even get same-day appointments. ZocDoc is how I found my dentist, who I really like. I was cycling through dentists I wasn't crazy about. This guy doesn't rip me off, and I found him through ZocDoc. I found other doctors through ZocDoc before, especially if you're new to a neighborhood and you want somebody close by, at least in my instance. That's how I kind of moved from my more childhood doctors in New Jersey I was still seeing to adult doctors here in New York and in Brooklyn. ZocDoc helped me make it easy there. And also, it's so annoying to have to call your doctors and they never play phone tag. This gives you an interface where you can book online and you can see what appointments are available. I'd like to thank ZocDoc for sponsoring today's episode. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/majority to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/majority, ZocDoc.com/majority. We will put a link to this below in the YouTube video and episode descriptions. And lastly, let's talk about comfort that shows up day in, day out. Cozy Earth nailed comfort with their bamboo sheets and their eucalyptus pants, next level. Cozy Earth, I actually have a duvet from them that I adore. It's great both in the winter and in the summer. I don't know how they do it, but it somehow temperature regulates in both instances. So I don't have to like add a bunch of blankets in the winter or take it off in the summer. The duvet, it's great. I also was very happy to hear some feedback on some Cozy Earth pajama sets that I got for folks. I got it for my mother-in-law last Christmas, and she literally says it's her favorite pair. The Cozy Earth also has the Everywhere pant. Sam is constantly raving about it. It's both casual and both like you can wear it in casual settings, but it's also one you can wear in formal settings, and the comfort is exactly the same. Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets are temperature regulating, guaranteed to give you a comfortable night's sleep. They naturally wick away heat and moisture from your body, helping you sleep several degrees cooler. Try them during the hottest nights of the year. If you are not in love, return them hassle-free, but trust me, you're not going to want to. There's a 10-year warranty on all bedding products. Thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. Go to CozyEarth.com and use our code MajorityReport for 40% off the softest bedding, bath, and apparel. Sorry. And if you get a post-purchase survey, tell them you heard about Cozy Earth right here, built for real life. Make made to keep up with yours, Cozy Earth. That's cozyearth.com, and use our code Majority Report, one word, for 40% off bedding, bath, and approval. Link will be down below in the YouTube episode descriptions. Again, cozyearth.com/Majority Report for up to 40% off best-selling temperature regulating sheets, apparel, and more. Quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Joseph Lee. We are back, and we are joined now by Joseph Lee, author of Nothing More of This Land, Community Power, and the Search for Indigenous Identity. Joseph, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So, your book talks about your experience growing up as a member of the Aquinnah Wampanoag. Am I saying it okay? Nation?
Aquinnah Wampanoag.
Wampanoag, gotcha. Which is indigenous to Martha's Vineyard. Aquinnah was called Gayhead when I was a kid, and now it's Aquinnah again. I mean, we can just start there. Like, what was it, the late 90s or the early 2000s when Martha's Vineyard finally changed that area of the island back to the indigenous name?
Yeah, it was the late 90s, and yeah, so I grew up also with, knowing it as Gayhead, and then when I was a kid, the name changed, and so obviously Aquinnah is our original name, the Wampanoag name for the place, and then Gayhead is the I guess colonial name you would call it. Right. And then in the 90s, the town voted to change it back to Aquinnah.
Yeah, people may know Martha's Vineyard as a vacation spot for wealthier people on the East Coast, off the coast of Massachusetts. The Obamas, I think they sold their house there, but they had a big kind of mansion there for a while. But you open your book talking a bit about the famous Aquinnah Cliffs and an indigenous story about them. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because so much of what you write about is just like this lost history or this very de-emphasized history versus, say, in Massachusetts, the Mayflower, what about that contrast was important for you to highlight?
Yeah, so I mean, I should say that also, I grew up in Massachusetts and grew up with those same stories of learning about the Mayflower and the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving. And at the same time, I was also growing up in the tribe and learning these stories like the one you mentioned, where the clay cliffs were stained the colorful colors they have today by one of our ancient leaders who was a giant, and he would go out into the water and grab whales and like smash them against the cliffs, and their blood would stain the cliffs red, and then the whale would feed the entire community. And so those were the stories I grew up on in the tribal side. And then on the other side, I grew up sort of with the American standardized colonial version. And yeah, it was really important to me to tell and share those stories just because that I think that's the truth. And that's a story that has been ignored and overlooked for so often, even to the point where myself growing up in the tribe, I kind of knew that the sort of American first Thanksgiving version of the story wasn't the whole story, but I didn't really know what else there was. And so that was one of the big goals of the book, was try to fill in some of those gaps for myself, for my tribe, and also for everybody. And
how does your experience on Martha's Vineyard with your connection to your community and growing up in Massachusetts on and off the island, why did you think it was important to kind of make clear the uniqueness too of your experience, where you compare it to, say, maybe tribes out on reservations and that life in the West versus a less, I think, discussed story of indigenous communities that were basically like pushed out because of land deals on the East Coast. We don't typically speak about indigenous rights in this country with that area of the country in mind.
Yeah, I think that was definitely one of the big motivators that I had is, I always sort of felt that sort of stereotypical standardized version of Native history, the more Western story, the plains, the reservations, the deserts out West. But I didn't really see that much conversation about tribes in the East Coast, especially the Northeast, like my tribe. I think that's a really important part of Indigenous history, American history, that we tend to overlook. And I think another really important aspect of that is that, this is all Indigenous history, and Indigenous history is really diverse, nuanced, and complex, whereas we have sort of this flattened, really narrow version of what it is in this country. Like, you have to look a certain way, you have to be a certain way. Indigenous history means this very one specific thing. But actually, if you look at all tribes across the country, you see all these sort of different histories of, Native people living outside of their communities, living in cities, coming and going. And so, in one way, yeah, I wanted to tell what I felt was a sort of unique, unheard Indigenous story, but I also wanted to look for a lot of those connections and similarities across different tribal nations.
And so, how does Martha's Vineyard play into this history? One, from an indigenous perspective, your tribe, but as well as its role in just like American colonial conquest more broadly, including, its fairly unique place in American civil rights history as it relates to slavery. It kind of all blends together to paint this picture of this very specific part of the country.
Yeah, I think Martha's Vineyard is a good example of how history and modern life is just more complicated than we tend to think of it. The common vision of Martha's Vineyard is that it's just fancy celebrities, presidents, vacation spots, these like multi-million-dollar homes. But it's also the home of my tribe. It's a home of a really long time historical Black community. There's a really active deaf community on the island. There's a really enormous Brazilian, Portuguese immigrant population on the island. And so, yeah, the island is just this really unique place, but we, like Native identity, we think of it in like just this one very specific way. And for my tribe in particular, the way that the island has impacted us primarily in recent years is through sort of the tourism and hype and celebrity culture. Where, we have this massive influx of summer visitors every year. The homes are really expensive. There are pools and private beaches, all of these things. And so property values are really high, and that means taxes are really high. And so for tribal members on the island, it's really, really hard to afford to live there. If you own land, the taxes are really expensive. If you don't own land, it's virtually impossible to buy it. The cost of living is really high. And so in some ways, I think that's like a microcosm of sort of this bigger picture of American colonialism and land grabbing that's happened across the country. But on Martha's Vineyard, it's just happened in this really specific and unique place that people have these specific associations with. And so I think talking about the tribe is kind of a way of exposing that, but also complicating it.
And also reflected in kind of your childhood experience of splitting, being off island and then on island, and that difference being really just a reflection of what you're talking about, indigenous folks being priced out because of land purchases. And I mean, gentrification is a term that's used in the modern context, but that's basically it. It's colonialism, but in the modern, it's like this very soft. It's a softer edge to describe it, but it's an extension of that history.
Yeah, I mean, I think we tend to think of colonialism as something that kind of ended I think in recent years, there's been maybe like a growing acknowledgement that it happened at all, which I think is progress. But I think even with that, there's kind of like this, well, something really bad happened a couple hundred years ago. Some people did some bad things and, it was unfortunate. But what you see through all these different places and sort of machines at work, whether it's gentrification or colonialism more broadly, or other forms of land grabbing or oppression, I think it becomes really clear that colonialism never ended. I think the form or the means just changed and evolved. And so I think that, that's what we're seeing on Martha's Vineyard, whether it's through tourism, home prices, in some cases, conservation and other means.
I mean, your tribe had been on this land for, what was it, something like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And now in the modern day, the thing that kind of sustains this like extremely unaffordable island, or what is of kind of remains of the community there, is, as you say, tourism. Can you speak a little bit about tourism and also capitalism and the extractive ways that those work together, especially when this is a community that can't even really afford to live in many ways, is being pushed out of the land that was theirs?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to talk a little bit generally about the way that capitalism has impacted Indigenous people, and specifically my tribe, the primary way that that's happened is through land. And there was a U.S. government policy known as land allotment, where basically collective Indigenous owned and managed land was taken out of collective ownership and put into individual ownership. So individual tribal members were told, okay, now you have 2 acres here, or 10 acres, or whatever it was, different, land block sizes. And then a lot of people essentially after that, in my tribe and many others across the country, were forced to sell their land, because suddenly, you're not sharing land with the community and managing it together. You have this one piece of land that's yours, and you have to pay taxes on it, and you have to pay for all these other things in your life that have now come up. So that's one of the ways that colonialism and U.S. colonialism in particular took land from my tribe and many others. It's something like millions of acres across the country were taken this way. And then today on Martha's Vineyard, when we're talking about tourism, tourism is the biggest industry on the island. My family, which I write about in the book, owns a seasonal gift shop that my grandparents started in the 70s, kind of around the time that Martha's Vineyard was becoming the island that we know it as today. And tourism is a really kind of, it's an interesting thing, because the tribe, or many people in the tribe, in some ways are forced to rely on it to make a living, but it's not really a great choice. Or if it is a choice at all, it's this industry that's essentially bringing these people to our shores every summer, who make it more and more difficult to live there, more and more difficult to afford life on our homelands. But on the other hand, it is the sort of best way we have of making a living right now. And in the book, I talk a little bit about other tribes and other Indigenous people across the country and around the world who are sort of in similar predicaments. So a lot of us have been put in this, rock in a hard place situation.
Well, it obviously Palestine cannot escape our minds at this moment, but when we're talking about colonialism never ending, we see an extremely brutal example of it there. And even in the West Bank, it reminds me of what, you write about treaties signed by indigenous communities and the colonizers, or hint at it, I guess. The myth of like Thanksgiving that you talk about flattens the power dynamics to such a degree that it's like so imperceptible. But it's important to note that these collaborations between indigenous communities and colonizers were exploitative, extractive, deceptive, and obviously your tribe didn't escape this, but this was in a tactic used throughout, almost like the veneer of legality of some sort of contract that gives white people everything, and in the indigenous communities very little.
Yeah, I think that's one of the evolutions of colonialism that we've seen. You know, maybe a few hundred years ago, they didn't need to have a piece of paper to do it, or they didn't care. They would
Right.
just, you know, kill some people and, hey, this is our land now. And then times change and they say, okay, we need, you know, maybe a couple lines on a piece of paper. And then times change a little bit more and they say, okay, we need to pass some laws. And so, like federal allotment laws that I mentioned, you know, that's an example of that. There are federal termination laws where tribes were essentially told you're not a tribe anymore. And yeah, and you know, you bring up Palestine, and I think it's no coincidence that a lot of the sort of people involved there are really, really excited about possible tourism properties, right? Or these like fancy hotels that people want to build, you know, on the sea and that sort of thing. So I think, yeah, it's the same story around the world. And I think it's really important to be able to track that lineage rather than see these things as separate, both in terms of time and place, right? The machine, as we're talking about, has kind of evolved. It's popping up in different places, but in many ways, it's the exact same thing.
Can you speak a bit about some of the ways in, say, modern day or recent history that indigenous communities and tribes have tried to create alternative economies that can benefit them? Like, I mean, gambling is the trope, and I know there was a vote on this within your tribe as well. But the origins of that and why it's so necessary to form some of these networks of you know, economic opportunity given the circumstances you lay out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about sort of capitalistic systems. And I think the reality for most tribes right now is, you know, we live in this country and we live within these systems, and money is the thing that has power right now. And so for tribes that are trying to get casinos or have casinos or running successful casinos, I think that that's sort of a means of doing that, right? That's one of the means available to tribes is using casinos as a way of making money. And you'll see tribes do different things. Sometimes tribes are sending out money, you know, individually to tribal members, economic stimulus, essentially. Tribes will also use casino money to fund government programs, to fund scholarships, to, you know, build new buildings, build housing, all of these things, right? So, yeah, I think, you know, it's not a perfect response, but in the same way that tribes like mine who are having to deal with tourism economies are trying to figure out like, well, how can we make this work for us? I think casinos are one example of that. But I think there's, you kind of mentioned this, that like, it's sort of like, that's the thing that gets all the attention.
Right. But it's also, I mean, both of those instances, tourism or gambling, it's not really about owning, say, like the means of production. This is all still dependent on the patronage of folks coming either to the casino or to the island or to the area. And it's not a method of like wealth reproduction. It's basically been completely stripped from many minority groups in this country, but indigenous and native tribes feels quite acute.
Yeah, I think in recent years you've seen a really growing food sovereignty movement, which I would say is kind of in response to a lot of these things you're talking about. Like
Right.
Our land has been taken, our ways of life have been taken, our culture has been taken, our opportunities to succeed and thrive as a people have been taken. And so food sovereignty of like, we're going to grow our own food, we're going to use it to support our community, whether that's just sharing the food, selling the food, whatever it is. That's an example that you see across the country. And I think that's also why a lot of the fights happening now over, for example, dams and rivers or lakes are really important, because that's tribes trying to not sort of just like participate in the economy. That's tribes trying to retake everything, retake the land, retake culture, retake their way of life. And I think that's why you're seeing such massive legal fights over like energy extraction and these things, because that's a real challenge to the system rather than like, you know, a small business or something like that.
Well, this is going to be a fight over the next 3.5 years with the administration trying to drill more and more on federally protected lands, which sometimes, you know, coincide with indigenous lands. And even down in Florida, the most like substantial legal obstacle that has been placed in front of the Trump administration at this moment has been the successful challenging of the construction of the so-called alligator Alcatraz on lands that should be protected for indigenous communities. And the judge down in Miami last week sided with indigenous rights activists on this front. And you just like in that example there, you can see how the struggles are so interconnected, even in just that one example.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe a belated lesson, but I think a lot of people with, this and the previous Trump administration are learning like tribes can play a really powerful role here because of their position, because of their land, because of their legal rights and privileges that are sort of in many ways an accidental quirk of a colonial system. But it's something that tribes have right now. And so I think people are starting to pay a lot more attention to tribes than they did in the past. And yeah, the example with the Miccosukee tribe in Florida that you just gave is a really, really great example of that, where I think a lot of people who may have ignored tribes before are suddenly like, oh, like we got to work with these people. And federal lands is a great example where, tribes have been trying to protect their land and resources and water forever. And I think it's only more so in recent years that environmental groups, liberal groups, whoever it is, have sort of caught on to the fact that like tribes can and should be leading the way on some of these issues.
When now we're kind of, in the modern context of today and just thinking about things like how we can find solidarity in our community, how we can make connections and create networks to combat the fascist administration. It occurs to me, of course, that like there might be some sort of renewed purpose, not that there needs any renewal, but a new perspective on perhaps tribal communities in this time, especially as we're so like, alienated and atomized from one another. How does your tribal community fit into today's world for you?
Yeah, I mean, just on the first part of your question there, I think one of the things I think about and talk about in the book is like, none of this is new for tribes. So I think the way that, some Americans are feeling like, oh, this is new. And, in many ways, the specifics are new, but the thing is the same. The challenges are the same. And so I think for a lot of tribes, it's like, it hasn't mattered so much who's in power or what's going on, but the fight is the exact same fight. And so, what it looks like for my tribe right now is it's a challenge. And I think it's also important to talk about internal conflicts and disagreements within tribes. We're all trying to figure out, like, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? What's the right move? And you mentioned a few, disagreements that my tribe has had. We have fierce tribal elections. We have fierce debates and tribal meetings. And those are all things that we're trying to figure out, as we are also a dispersed people. Most of us no longer live on our homelands on Martha's Vineyard. So the challenge, I think, is trying to find ways to connect and build community, even when maybe some of those more traditional ways we used to have been changed. And I think that's something that everybody can probably relate to and try to work on right now. It's some of the same systems that we maybe used to rely on, we can't rely on anymore. And so we have to find new ways of building systems and community to go forward.
The disbursement in and of itself is a way to undercut that, right? We do have some means to connect now technologically that we didn't have previously, but just in thinking about these colonial structures, disbursement is quite beneficial for colonizers because you don't have a network that's going to be more united in opposition, and that's clearly what has been inflicted upon the tribes in this country.
Yeah, I think, it's totally not an accident at all that tribes have been dispersed and that my tribe has, been in many ways forced off of our land and forced to live in other places. I think what I read a little bit about in the book and what I'm trying to think of now is like ways that we can use that as a strength and ways that we can try to take advantage of the situation we're in. And like you mentioned, obviously technological tools. I write in the book about taking Wampanoag language class on Zoom for the first time. We have virtual meetings. We have mail-in voting. These are all things that we didn't have before. And I think those are positive things that allow us to bring our community together in a way that we couldn't before. And, for me as a writer and journalist, I think I've learned a lot from traveling around the country and talking to other Indigenous tribes. And when I talk to people, as much as I want to learn from them, they're always kind of like, can you tell me like stuff from your reporting, like you've learned from other tribes? And then when I go home, people ask me like, what are you hearing from other tribes? And so I think hopefully that's something that we can do. And, you're kind of getting at this, like building solidarity and building community and finding those ways through. And I think that's where we have to go.
Lastly, you mentioned your reporting. I know you've done some work at GRIST for climate change reporting. How does the struggle for her kind of, more Indigenous representation, rights, just reparations, how does that fit into the climate fight right now? I mean, Donald Trump is obviously maniacal. We're going to cover this later in the show, but he's trying to kill a Rhode Island wind farm that is 80% complete, that could give energy for over 300,000 homes, just because, it's time to consolidate around oil, or he finds wind farms ugly or something like that. But obviously the fight for our climate is a fight for us all, but I would imagine that your history and your work on Indigenous rights gives you an even broader perspective on it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this. I mean, I think climate and conservation work is one area where historically, even among, more left-leaning people and groups, Indigenous people have been left out. Mm-hmm. And I think, today you see it's like, well, we know what to do with the land, right? We know how to make decisions. And so you'll see my tribe, for example, many people in the tribe are not in favor of these wind farms. And I read a little bit about, Sami communities in Europe who are also against wind farms. And I think that's nothing to do with, being against green energy or these other things, but it has to do with being told what to do with land and acting like Indigenous people don't have any ownership or knowledge. And so I think that's where we need to go in climate change and conservation, is actually work with and listen to Indigenous people. Mm-hmm. And I think these moments are making it even more and more clear, like it can't be, everybody on, in a different silo, in a different side. It needs to be all of us fighting to protect the environment against, the administration and anyone else who's trying to harm it. And so I think that's like the lesson that I take out of that.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of like, the early suffragette movement being extremely white or wealthy, and
right.
And the conservation movement too, even historical societies and things like that, where these are a lot of wealthy people doing this to do good in their very narrow vision of what that is, and that excludes often the communities most affected by it. So even like our framework for social justice on certain topics were pushed forward by wealthier white people, and so these systems replicate themselves to this day.
Yeah, and the model is kind of like donate a bunch of money to a nonprofit owned, as you say, by rich white people, and then like the environment will be okay. But obviously that has not worked. So it's clear like we need to try something different. And in many cases, it's the thing that Indigenous people have been trying to do, and in some cases legally prevented from doing for generations. That is the thing that will actually work.
Joseph Lee, the book is called Nothing More of This Land, Community, Power, and the Search for Indigenous Identity. We will put a link to your book wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much for your time today, Joseph. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, with that, we will wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half, where we will take your calls, read your IMs. We have some, actually juicy stories in the fun half today that we didn't really get to here, including, Trump purchasing a stake in Intel. You have some centrists calling it socialism, why it's not. That wind farm story is insane. I want to get to, obviously, Israel striking Nasser Hospital. Not as fun, but something we're going to be covering too. check us out in the fun half, folks. But Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Left Reckoning, we got into a clip that might play in the fun half here of the real reason why Omar Fateh's endorsement at the convention was rescinded. And it turns out the process was a fig leaf for the real reason. Donors.
Oh.
Donors didn't want checks to cash anymore.
Yeah.
Explicitly. That's barely a paraphrase. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning, you get access to the Sunday show.
All right, guys, we will see you in the fun half. But first, just a reminder, this show relies on your support. Join themajorityreport.com. Please, if you can, it helps support our work. You can IM into the show. We'll read your IMs in the fun half. The select few that are members and are able to IM the show. Sunset Lake Sebede said, are you guys going to discuss Jillian Michaels' whitewashing of slavery? That was an old story, but that woman is insane. I watched that. So she's suing over this Netflix documentary about The Biggest Loser, or threatening to, and I saw this headline. I was like, there must be some bad stuff in here. So I started watching it. It's so boring, but she's just a horrible person, but we already knew that.
Is she like a Dr. Drew of fitness?
I mean, she's just like abusive to the contestants, and I guess there's a point where she gives them like caffeine pills.
Yeah, the caffeine stuff has always been the hairy thing I've seen with her. Is like, and I've heard she's very litigious about that. So. Oh,
okay. Well, this is what the documentary claims, not myself. I just want to put that out there. Right. I mean, yeah, I guess like I wasn't, but it is
a bit like a kook, and I mean,
why is she a political commentary
well, that's what
person
I said.
now?
So
who cares?
I tweeted out when that happened, like who books the show, which Brian informed me is a comedian thing to say about when the clips go like viral or something like that. But then Sam ended up on the show, so I don't know if like maybe because a lot of people retweeted me wondering like why are we asking this fitness quack about slavery? Or having her even in the room, like what is her credential besides she's a valuetainment property?
Well, I saw that Abby Phillip did like a correction show after that, kind of slamming her, which is just like that. We had that on the sound sheet. We didn't end up covering it because it's just we have so much other crap.
Yeah,
to do.
it's trash.
She got what she wanted. She got in the headlines and she said something inflammatory and deeply racist, and then like their only black primetime host had to correct it. Who they stick the Scott Jennings guy on,
That's
by the
what
way,
I'm saying.
CNN.
Like, the entire show has a problem with booking.
I don't like
how
what's
going on over there.
Yeah, it seems a little messed up that they kind of seem to put all of that crap on Abby Phillip's plate. But what do I know?
Good to have Sam.
Was she the one that said,
yeah.
No.
Well, she's good for her. She holds her own, but they like
Exactly.
It feels racist to me in ways that like maybe I'm overthinking it, but I don't know.
That's why
they
it
don't
seems
stick
like
that on
that's in their
Caitlin
hand.
Collins or who's their other host, Cooper. They give all of that garbage gutter trash to their black female hosts, and it feels wrong. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I just think whoever is booking Sam should be listened to more than the people who keeps wanting. Scott Peters or whatever his name is, the Zionist guy.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And
Scott
Jillian
Jennings.
Michaels,
Scott Jennings. Yeah.
Scott Jennings. Yeah. And Jillian Michaels. Are you joking?
Yeah.
Like you have millions of dollars. You have millions of people watching this to try to get informed.
Right.
And you're gonna have Jillian fucking Michaels on to talk about slavery or talk about anything. Like, what is she qualified to talk about? Besides suing people over some drama about caffeine pills.
Yeah, just, verbally abusing overweight people.
Like it's like it
who are
is
struggling and trying their
I know
hardest.
It's hack. I know it's hack in a way that even like I think Sam doesn't know it's hack yet. But to compare things to Idiocracy. But when you have Jillian Michaels on to talk about anything of importance, what are we doing with our lives, folks? You're wasting people's lives on a industrial scale with CNN.
Anyway, see you guys in the fun half.